Oh, so happy 2022 to everyone. And also, here's the great thing, because of the magic of when Christmas falls this year, I also can still say to you, Merry Christmas. That's because we're still officially in the Christmas season. The church, of course, gives us all this time to celebrate Christmas, 12 whole days, right? Until the Feast of Epiphany, when we recognize the coming of the three kings. Now, the world out there, well, they are done with all of those 2021 retrospectives, and they've already jumped headfirst into 2022. But the great thing is that here, thanks to the wonders of our liturgical calendar, we, like the Magi of old, are given a little bit of extra time. We are in this special in-between space where we still get to look over the edge of the manger and gaze in awe and praise at the glowing presence of the Christ child. So, if you haven't had a chance yet because you've been busy cooking or celebrating or enjoying the sunshine or the rain, whichever day it happened to be, or maybe the snow if you've come down from the mountains, you still have a few more days to behold Jesus as a beautiful babe before we forge on ahead into the coming liturgical year, which also is filled with lots of turmoil, drama, because it's all about Jesus' role in our salvation through his life and ministry. So you know what today is? It's kind of like an extra Christmas gift. So we're going to play with it. It's our new toy. See, we don't often get to Sundays in the Christmas season because Christmas has to fall on, I think it's like a Saturday and a Sunday for it to even work at all, possibly a Monday. And if that second Sunday in Christmas season happens to be on January 4th or January 5th, well, most churches are just going to go ahead and do Epiphany anyway, because the chances of realistically getting a crowd of people to come back within the next day or two are not great, right? We're all realists out here. So the crafters of our lectionary, well, they didn't quite know what to do with Epiphany, especially year C, given that reality. I mean, they don't want us missing anything that's critical to hear every year in the narrative. But there's also not really 3 years worth of stuff that falls between the birth of Jesus and the coming of the three kings to give them 3 years of non-essential material to throw on this Sunday. So, the official gospel for today, if I had stuck to the full plan, according to the crafters of the lectionary, would have been to just jump ahead. We would have skipped the coming of the Magi, we would have saved that for later in the week, and then we would have heard today just the swift and dangerous flight of the Holy Family into Egypt. It's funny timeline, so I chose to give you the whole reading, including the coming of the Magi, because, well, it really sets the context for the whole story, and it just doesn't quite make sense without it. But I'm also going to invite us today to really savor and hang out in that space that is what the lectionary crafters imagined for us today, that in-betweenness of the family of Jesus having to flee shortly after his birth. This is part of the story of Jesus' young life that is actually unique to the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew's telling of Jesus' birth, well, it's really simple compared to Luke. Now, Luke is what we hear always on Christmas Eve with the angels and the shepherds and all of that, but none of that is in Matthew's Gospel. Matthew simply says, Jesus is the Messiah. He is a descendant of the line of David, and then he sends an angel to Joseph to tell him that Mary's with child. And then the angel, he names Jesus, explains who he's going to be for Joseph, says he's God with us, come to save us from our sins. And then Matthew reminds us that he will be born in Bethlehem, and that's about it. Done. None of the drama that we get around the birth. So you can see why we stick with Luke for Christmas services. proper. It seems like Matthew is less interested in the miracle and wonder of Jesus' birth and more interested in the ways that Jesus fulfills God's promises to us. Over and over again, we hear him say that line that we heard a couple times in this morning's reading. This was to fulfill, and then it kind of fills in what prophecy he's pointing backwards to. Because for Matthew, Jesus is the one who fulfills God's promises, those promises that were made in prophecies of old. Now, the gospel for today gives us lots of drama too. Lest you thought all the drama happened on Christmas Eve, well, here's some real drama for you today too. There is Herod. He's jealous that there might be a rival king, and he makes this murderous threat to the newborn Messiah. And then we get this young family fleeing into a foreign land. Now, once again, what we've heard is Joseph being asked to listen to God's difficult and frightening demands being put upon him and his family, sent to him in a dream. He's not given any time to ponder. He just has to get up, take his newborn baby and Mary, the mother, and run into Egypt in the middle of the night. Now, Egypt is hundreds of miles across the desert. They just had to trust God and God's presence in this dream, and then leave without even saying goodbye. I pray I never have to take my family and run in the middle of the night, but many people have and do today have to do such a thing across our whole world. You see, the Holy Family, they were refugees. They were fleeing state violence. As T.S. Eliot once put it, angels and miracles abound at Jesus' birth. But those principalities and powers are there too. The Holy Family left under the threat of death, and they had much to fear along the way. In her imaginative recreation of Mary and Joseph's journey, called Dance in the Desert, Madeleine L'Engle gives us a setting of how this must have been for them. She writes, "There's terror in the desert. The man setting out with his wife and small son knew that it is not safe to cross the desert alone. Did not need to say aloud all that he knew there was to fear. The owl screams and rushes down in a cloud of feathers and talons and steels. The eagle snatches the stray child and bears it to a distant eyrie. The lion, almost invisible, stalks with so soft paws until he leaps upon his unsuspecting prey." Now, I hate to think that that was the first experience of our world that Jesus found when coming to live as one of us. And yet it's the same story that reminds us that from the very beginning, God came to share in the worst of our human suffering. Jesus' story, it's a story of exile. Christmas is about God with us, but it also is talking about God with us in exile. Our other readings from today, well, they just help make this even more central of a point. That wonderful reading from Jeremiah, it finds God's people in exile. You see, it's not a reading of terror or lamentation. It's a reading of hope and faith that God is in the process of and will fully bring all of the scattered people home. That prophet, Jeremiah, he reads out in certainty, in God's own voice, "See, I am going to gather them from the farthest points of earth, and I will lead them back." Now, you can imagine the faith that it must have taken Jeremiah to make this promise to a people in the middle of despair, of having lost everything. And you know what? I wonder how many of those people thought that he was just raving mad for saying these things. I mean, lots of people might feel the same way today if someone was telling us stuff like that. given some of the realities that we're looking around at. It may be an odd choice to bring to the fore those times in life when we felt separated from everything that's familiar, that's love, that's home, where God feels absent on this seldom observed but occasionally necessary Sunday that is part of Christmas. But you know what? I think that maybe this might be one of those years when it's just the right fit. There's moments for all of us when even the promises of Christmas seem wonderful but crazy ravings. I think this year in particular, as we look back at 2021 and ahead at 2022, we can all be forgiven if amidst all of that genuine hope that we hold for the coming year, we also feel a little bit like exiles, out in the wilderness, fleeing to a strange and hostile land, looking everywhere for those signs that God is here with us in the middle of all that's happening. It's a perfect time to remember what Matthew told us over and over and over again. Jesus is the one who fulfills God's promises to be with us and to bring us home. These stories of exile and return, they are part of our Christmas season. Christmas, you see, tells us that we are exiles no more. It's giving us that first glimpse of our way home to God. Matthew knew what was important. The Christ child that glows with that divine radiance is also Emmanuel, God with us, come to save us from our sins. Christmas is a story of hope to all people in exile, everyone who's seeking a way home, and it tells us that God is with us every step of the way along this road. You see, these stories, they remind us that God was not mute. God sent prophets like Jeremiah to his people to assure them, and God sent that angel to Joseph, giving him the guidance he needed to protect Jesus and Mary so that they could survive this exile until Herod had passed on and they could come back to their native land. That story by Madeleine L'Engle that I referred to earlier, called Dance in the Desert, it doesn't just talk about how terrifying that journey must have been. It's a beautiful illustrated book. It's kind of old. It's from the 60s, so it has these wonderful sort of three-tone drawings. I think there's just blue, green, black outline, and then this really bright yellow. And it's set at the campfire out in the desert in the middle of the night. And what happens in this story is every last one of those fearsome beasts that I mentioned earlier, they all come to the edge of that fire. Not to attack or take, but to bow down to the Christ child. It seems that God's presence is so powerful that even those wild animals in the wilderness, they too can sense that God is among us. Today's readings are stories of being cast into exile and seeking hope in the middle of all of that. All of those signs of God's presence in these stories are our reminder that God is with us always. Because Christmas tells us that no matter where we are in life's journey, God has not and will never give up on us. We're always being shown the way home. This Thursday, on Epiphany, we can all return to the Magi, gazing into the face of Christ. And we can read the stories out of order. We're allowed today, in this little funky in-between space, to focus on that experience of being away, being out in the wilderness, being not sure what's going to happen, and knowing that God, the light of Christ, is with us. It's New Year's, so I want to do two things today. First of all, everybody should have a little sticky note on your bulletin. If you could just take a minute to write, and I'll let you decide what you want to do with this. Either a hope for this year, a resolution, a prayer for the world, whatever you want. And then you have a choice. You can either share it. We'll take a moment if people want to share it, but you don't have to share it. You can take it home with you. You could stick it up on your fridge. That's why I give out sticky notes. Or if you want, you can put it in the fire where we're burning our greens. It's your choice. But just take a minute and write down what your resolution, hope, prayer for the coming year is. People at home, you can write it on any old scrap of paper. I couldn't figure out a way to get sticky notes out through the internet. All right, how are we doing? Is there anyone who has one that they would like to share today? A prayer, a hope, a resolution for the year. And online congregation, you're welcome to share too. Just hold up your hand so Nathaniel can see if there's anyone who has one to share. Go ahead, Annie.
So I pray that there's a resolution found to the volatile situation in Ukraine.
For the volatile situation, say the left.
Ukraine.
In the Ukraine. Okay. I'm going to repeat that for the people online. Pray that there's a solution and resolution for the volatile situation in the Ukraine. Thank you. Anyone else have one they want to share, either here in the church or online? All right. Go ahead, Donna, and then Gretchen.
The world, and here's my wish, the world has increasing awareness of the presence of God's grace. All religions and faith traditions have become aware of their common hopes and dreams for peace and wholeness.
Well, thank you. I'm going to try to summarize that. The world has increasing awareness of the presence of God, and that all religions understand our common bonds together and find peace. All right, thank you for that. Gretchen, did you have one you wanted to share?
I had one, I just said, I pray that we still have a democracy.
Pray for our democracy. Thank you, Gretchen. Donna?
I have prayers for patience and understanding between each other.
Prayers for patience and understanding between each other. Thank you, Donna. Is there anyone online? I want to make sure you don't get left out.
Trish.
Trish, you go ahead.
Oh.
Oh.
Unmute Trish.
I wanted to pray for healing for those who are suffering illness, sickness, and disease in this year.
Yeah. Thank you, Trish. Thank you for that. Anyone else that I'm missing in our online congregation? All right. Thank you, everyone, for those. And feel free to offer them during our intercessions, or we'll put them in the fire, or you can take them home. It's really up to you. I just want to close with a poem. I don't know if anybody remembers Amanda Gorman. She was the poet who spoke at the inauguration this past year. And she posted this poem in her Instagram feed this week for New Year's, and it's called New Day's Lyric. May this be the day we come together, morning we come to mend, withered we come to weather, torn we come to tend, battered we come to better, tethered this year of yearning we are learning that though we weren't ready for this, we have been readied by it. Steadily we vow that no matter how we are weighed down, we must always pave a way forward. This hope is our door, our portal. Even if we never get back to normal, someday we can venture beyond it, to leave the known and take the first steps. So let us not return to what was normal, but reach toward what is next. What was cursed, we will cure. What was plagued, we will prove pure. Where we tend to argue, we will try to agree. Those fortunes we forswore, now the future we foresee. We weren't aware, we're now awake. Those moments we missed are now those moments we make. Moments we meet and our hearts once altogether beaten, now altogether beat. Come, look up with kindness yet, for even solace can be sourced from sorrow. We remember not for the sake of yesterday, but to take on tomorrow. We heed this old spirit in a new day's lyric. In our hearts we hear it, for Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne. Be bold, sang time this year, be bold, sang time. For when you honor yesterday, tomorrow ye will find. Know what we fought, need not be forgot nor for none. It defies us, it binds us as one. Come over, join this day just begun. For wherever we come together, we will forever overcome.